Think before you judge. Mr. Roy was a well respected judge in the city. Known for his wisdom and fair judgments, people trusted him to deliver justice. He had spent years in the courtroom, listening to cases and making decisions. However, over time, Mr. Roy began to feel confident that he could tell who was guilty or innocent just by looking at them. He thought his years of experience had given him the ability to quickly judge people. One rainy afternoon, Mr. Roy was sitting in his courtroom, ready to hear a new case. The case was about a young woman named Meera, who was accused of stealing a valuable necklace from a wealthy lady. Meera looked nervous as she stood in the courtroom, her eyes lowered and her hands shaking. She wore simple clothes and looked like someone who struggled to make ends meet. The wealthy lady, Mrs. Sharma, stood proudly, pointing at Meera. "This girl stole my necklace," Mrs. Sharma exclaimed. "I saw her near my house that day, and now my necklace is gone. She is the only one who could have done it." Mr. Roy looked at Meera. She was quiet, and she didn't seem to argue much. He thought to himself, "She looks guilty. Why else would she be so nervous?" Without listening to Meera's side of the story, Mr. Roy began to believe that she had stolen the necklace. But before he made his final judgment, Mr. Roy decided to hear both sides properly. He asked Meera to tell her story. With a soft voice, Meera began to speak. "Your Honor, I work as a cleaner in many houses. I was near Mrs. Sharma's house that day because I was helping clean a neighbor's home. I did not steal the necklace. I have never stolen anything in my life. I live with my mother, and we barely have enough to eat, but I would never take what does not belong to me." Mr. Roy listened, but in his mind, he had already made up his mind. He thought, "She's poor, and poor people sometimes steal when they are desperate." He was about to declare Meera guilty when something unusual happened. A young boy suddenly ran into the courtroom. He looked worried and was holding something shiny in his hands. "Wait! Wait!" the boy shouted. Everyone turned to look at him. He ran up to Mrs. Sharma and handed her the shiny object. It was the missing necklace. "Where did you find this?" Mrs. Sharma asked, shocked. The boy, out of breath, explained, "I found it in the park, near a bench. I think it fell out of your bag when you were sitting there. I saw your picture in the newspaper, so I came to return it." The courtroom went silent. Mr. Roy was stunned. The necklace hadn't been stolen after all. It had simply fallen out of Mrs. Sharma's bag. Meera was innocent, and the judge had almost declared her guilty without knowing the full truth. Mr. Roy felt ashamed of himself. He realized how close he had come to making an unfair judgment just because he had judged Meera based on her appearance and her financial situation. He looked at Meera, who had tears in her eyes, not because she was afraid, but because she was relieved. Clearing his throat, Mr. Roy said, "I am sorry, Meera. I was wrong to judge you without hearing your full story. You are free to go, and I hope you can forgive me." Meera nodded gratefully and left the courtroom with her head held high. That evening, Mr. Roy went home feeling troubled. He realized that no matter how experienced he was, it was wrong to make assumptions about people based on their appearance or circumstances. Everyone deserved a fair chance to explain themselves, and it was his duty as a judge to listen carefully before making any decision. The next day in court, Mr. Roy handled each case with extra care. He listened more patiently, asked more questions, and made sure he understood the full story before passing judgment. He never forgot the lesson he learned from Mira's case, that appearances can be deceiving, and it's important to think before you judge anyone. Never judge a person by their appearance or circumstance.